After 4 years of civil war in your country, what's left of Syria?
What's left is about the people. If you talk about the infrastructure, many has been destroyed and destructed during the last 4 years and few months. But it's about the people, what's left of the people, that's the question. And it's about how much they withstand this dark ideology that the terrorists brought with them from different countries. I think the majority of the people now support their government, regardless of their political spectrum, and they still support the unity of Syria and the integration of the society as one society with multicolor aspects.
Now, we hear shelling every day, even here in Damascus, even close by to where we are now. You say there's unity, the people believe in their government. Are you still so confident about that?
I'm more confident than before, to be frank, because if you go to the area under the control of the government, you can see all the different colors of the Syrian society with no exception. If you go to the areas where the terrorists control, you can see either part of this Syrian spectrum, social spectrum, or you can see no inhabitants, only fighters.
Right.
So the contrast is very clear.
Now, roughly 4,000 Syrians flee your country every day, 4.3 million up to date. You must hear some of their stories why they're leaving. How does that make you feel if you hear that?
It's sad stories. It's about hardship of every single person, every single family. We live with this story on daily basis, as you mentioned. But it's not enough to feel. What can we do? Because they left because of the terrorist attacks, direct attacks, because the terrorists attacked the infrastructure, and because of the Western embargo that led to the same target of the terrorists, directly or indirectly. I think most of those are ready to go back to their country. They still love their country, but the living in Syria could be unbearable for them for different circumstances.
You say most of them are ready to come back, but from many stories they tell is they flee for terrorism, of course, but a lot of them flee for your government and your armed forces as well.
Yeah, if you're in Syria now, you can go to the area under our control. You can see that some of the families of the terrorists or the extremists or the militants, whatever you want to call them, they live under the supervision of the government and the support of the government. So how could they, why didn't those families left Syria?
Okay, well, we hear stories in the West of Syrians coming here. They talk about torture, widespread, people in prison, things done by your armed forces. That's the reason why they leave. Is there truth to their stories?
Let's talk about the fact. The fact will tell you if it's true or not. If you are torturing your people, attacking, killing, and so on, and you have the enmity of Western government, the strongest country in the world, richest country like in the Gulf, like Turkey, all our neighbors are against me as president or against the government. How could you withstand for nearly 5 years in such circumstances if you don't have public support? And how can you have public support if you are torturing your people? I mean, if you have mistakes in reality, that could happen. That would happen anyway.
So
especially
there are mistakes,
of course, especially when there's war. You could have single mistakes committed by a certain person. That would happen. You have chaos sometimes. That would happen. We don't exclude this. But there's difference between having these kind of mistakes and between having policy in order to torture your people and lose their support.
You say there's no such policy.
No, of course, definitely.
Because
never
today Human Rights Watch and the UN before that came out with a report saying there's widespread, as they call it, death and dying in the detention centers since the uprising in 2011. Is there any truth to that?
If you want to verify the credibility of those reports, to say that they're not politicized, they're not talking about one side of the story. You mentioned the shelling of Damascus 3 days ago, and that happened every few days, and killing many civilians, innocent civilians. Did they mention anything about the reports? You have many evidence that's been published by the terrorists in the internet, photos, videos about torturing, about killing, about beheading. Did they mention those stories?
So it's one-sided. Even the UN?
Yeah, definitely, it's politicized. Even the UN is controlled by the United States, and the United States is against Syria. This is the reality, everybody knows.
But you are part of the UN. Syria is part of the UN family.
Yeah, but the UN is a biased institution because it's under the control of the United States and its allies.
And so you say reports about widespread torture, human rights violations after 2011, those are biased, not true.
They are based on stories. Stories, right. You can pay anyone to tell you any story. Like the Qatari is doing this, they publish many reports financed by the Qatari, by the Saudi. This means nothing. You want to make investigations, come to Syria. You have the reality.
Yeah, they say it's difficult to come to Syria and do independent investigation.
It's not difficult. You've been here, you are here, so anyone could do the same. Otherwise, if it's difficult for them to come, it's going to be difficult for them to judge the situation and to make reports.
Okay. Moving on, as you know, we are from Holland, we're from the Netherlands, and my country is bombing ISIS just across the border here in Iraq. Yeah. They are fighting the same enemy as you are. Would you consider the Netherlands an ally?
It depends on the real intention. What do you mean by fighting terrorists? Is it just because ISIS came here? Is it because you are afraid from their influence or effects in your region? Mm-hmm. If the incentive is fear, no, we're not allies.
You think the incentive is fear?
Yes, not the value. Because why didn't they fight terrorism from the very beginning? Before that, before ISIS appeared, you had al-Nusra, you had al-Qaeda, you have many terrorists. They didn't fight. Only this war on terrorism started to appear when there was 11th of September in the United States, mm-hmm. The recent attacks in Paris, and so on in different European countries. But before that, they didn't say we are at war with the terrorism.
So you mean they're late? They're late to the party?
It should be a matter of principle. When it's principle, it should be sustainable, not what you called a knee-jerk reaction when something you want to do it just as a reaction to something. So it's not principle. Fighting terrorism should be stable, sustainable principle. So this is where you can be allies.
In our case, Dutch bombers over Iraq bombing ISIS is a knee-jerk reaction. It's not sustainable.
Because it's a part of the European politics, and the European politics is part of the American. It's not independent. Mm-hmm. Everybody knows this. So I cannot judge only the Dutch politics as isolated case. It's part of this. Okay. And all this, let's say, Western politics regarding terrorism is not objective and not realistic, and actually not only not productive, it's a counterproductive.
Right. Because you would say they're bombing your enemy, so, well, they're helping in some way.
Because when you don't have the real intention and the realistic vision, the result will be in the other direction. You've been bombing, maybe you had good intention, maybe, the politicians in your country have good intentions, but what the reality? The reality that ISIS has been expanding since the coalition started in 2014.
So bombing is not working?
It's not working. You cannot fight terrorism without troops on the ground and without real social incubator that support you in your war against those terrorists.
So do you say bombing like the Dutch are doing is for show?
Maybe for sure, that depends on the intention, but in reality, for nothing, let's say. Right. Let's say for no avail.
Okay. Our government is next month deciding whether or not they will start bombing in your airspace as well, bombing ISIS targets in Syria. As they are debating this, what would you tell them?
This is illegal. This is against the international law. We are a sovereign country. If you are serious about fighting terrorism, what the obstacle for that government to call the Syrian government to say, let's cooperate in fighting terrorism? Right. The only obstacle is that the Western policy today towards Syria, that we need to isolate this state, that president, so we cannot deal with him. Right. Okay, you cannot reach anything. Right.
So you say it's illegal if the Dutch would bomb. They should ask your permission? That's what you're saying?
The government permission.
Have they ever been in touch with you about any of this?
No one of them, no one. No. Some European governments send their intelligence in order to make kind of cooperation, security cooperation regarding the terrorism, because they are afraid of the terrorists. Right. Of course,
because they say there's a mandate for it because Iraq has asked for its help, and now we can bomb in Syria as well.
No, they cannot. They don't have the right. This is illegal. In every sense of the word, illegal.
The Netherlands are also saying if there should be sustainable peace in Syria, that has to be without you. There might be a transitional period, but in the end, it can only be without you. What would you say to a statement like that?
If you accept as a Netherlands citizen that somebody in Syria would tell you who's going to be your prime minister or not, we will accept it. But you don't accept it, and we don't accept it. As you say, we are a sovereign country. Whether they have good president or bad president, this is a Syrian issue. It's not European.
Right.
The Europeans has nothing to do with such a thing. That's why we don't respond. We don't care about it.
Right.
Yeah,
You don't care about,
no,
in this case, the Dutch would say.
This is Syrian issue. The Syrian people would say who's going to stay or not. If the Syrian people doesn't want me to stay, I have to leave right away, today.
One more question about Holland and our neighboring country, Belgium. Hundreds of wannabe jihadis come here to Syria. Why are they coming here? What are they looking for?
The most important question, why did you have them in Europe? Coming, that's natural. When you have chaos, when Syria has been turned into a hotbed for terrorism because Europe and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and those countries supported terrorists in different ways, of course you're going to have chaos and there's going to be nexus for terrorism. That's natural for this fertile soil to attract terrorists from the rest of the world. But the question, why did you have them in Europe? You didn't deal with the terrorism in a realistic base.
So what did Europe do wrong in dealing with them?
I think it's about two things. If you ask me about why that's my question. First of all, the European government didn't do their job to integrate those people in their society. Okay. They lived in a ghetto. When you live in a ghetto, you're going to be extremist. The second one, many European officials have sold their values for the petrodollar, and they allowed the Wahhabi, Saudi institutions to pay money and to bring this dark and this extremist ideology to Europe. And that's why now you are exporting terrorists to us. No, we don't export. Actually, they came to Syria and then they go back to Europe.
They come back to us. Yeah.
And the three criminals who committed the attacks in Paris, all of them lived in Europe, Belgium and France and others. They didn't live in Syria.
Now, internationally, the United States always said President Assad has to go. Even yesterday, Secretary Kerry said, well, maybe not immediately, and we're not looking for regime change. Even the French are now saying the president may be part of a solution. Your luck seems to be changing.
Thank you for them to say that. I was packing my luggage. I had to leave. Now I can stay. We never care about whatever they say. They've been saying the same for 4 years now. Right. Did anything change regarding that issue? Nothing. So this is a Syrian issue. Whether it's Obama or United States or Europe or any country, we don't care about it. As long as the Syrians want this president or any other president to be in power, he will be there. So to say that he's leaving now or leaving in 6 months or 6 years is not their business, very simply.
Okay, but it might help in negotiation, some sort of peace plan. Their attitude towards you.
This is another issue that depends on the problem that we've had in Syria. It has many aspects. What the relation between this president or any other president to be in power and ISIS and al-Nusra and al-Qaeda coming to Syria and terrorists killing and beheading. Right. There's no relation. So this is just to mislead the public opinion, just to say that the problem in Syria is the president. So who's more important, the president or the country? Of course, the answer is the country, so the president has to leave. Right. So this is the equation that they try to promote. Right. The only equation for the president is the public opinion in his country, like your country, like any other country. Other than this, if they are serious in solving the problem in Syria, every European official just trying to deliver homilies that could be suitable for church and for mosque, not for politicians, they have to go and work to stop the flood and the flowing of terrorists and the money and logistic supports, armament through Turkey. That's what they have to do.
So Turkey is the key in all of this.
Of course, this is the logistical key. Of course, Saudi Arabia is the other key with their money and their ideology.
Well, coming to that, you say there's Turkey, Saudi Arabia. Internally, if there is, because there are 3 different initiatives to come to some sort of peace process, what would be parties you are willing to negotiate with?
Any person who holds armaments and kill people and destroy public and private properties and so on, he's a terrorist. So we don't, as a government, we don't make negotiations with the terrorists.
But the problem in this whole conflict is that everybody does that.
Exactly. So how to deal with this situation? Because we are very realistic and pragmatic. We made negotiations with the groups of militants, not organization. We don't recognize them as legitimate, to say we are making negotiations about the future of Syria. All of them are terrorists, and they don't have any political agenda, by the way. We made negotiation with a group of those in order to go back to their normal life, to give up their armaments and to have amnesty. And it worked. And this is really solution on the ground now. It's moving from area to area.
Right. Because, as I said, all the parties are involved in shelling, killing, your government as well.
Exactly.
How about international parties? Because they are involved in this conflict as well. Who would you be willing to talk to? Is it United States, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, or just Iran and Russia?
We are talking to everyone who wants to help in solving the problem. We don't have problem about talking. Yeah. The question, who's ready to deliver? That's the question.
Right. And who's ready to deliver?
None of them. Only Russia and Iran and their allies and the other countries that support politically the Syrian government or the Syrian legitimacy. But not the West. No one in the West is ready. Few countries are ready because they don't dare to make contact with Syria and to solve the problem unless the United States want to impose its agenda on them and on us.
But in the end, you would have to negotiate with as many parties as possible.
Of course.
Would you be willing to negotiate with parties whose aim it is to have you removed in the end?
Of course. I mean, their way, if they want me to go, they have the ballot box. We are ready. We don't have problem. They can convince the Syrian people that there's better alternative. This is not an appropriate choice for the future. And the president will leave. But they don't have problem.
That sounds really good, but in practice, realistically, in Syria, if you've seen the history of Syria, how much freedom do opposition parties have? How much freedom do politicians have to criticize you or to rise up against you?
Let me be objective. We're not Europe yet. And this is a cultural issue. It's not only political. But we are on the way for more democracy in Syria. We are moving slowly but surely. It's not something related to the president because Syria is not my company. It's a country, it has people. I mean, the process of democracy is a social process and political at the same time. So we're moving forward.
But one could say that 4 years ago, there was a step in that process of people rising up and there was a brutal crackdown. How many?
How many rised up? Do you have a number? The majority of the number in one day in Syria at the beginning of the crisis was 130,000. Let's make them double, 300. Right. Double them again, 600,000. It's nothing out of 24 million.
So you say nobody really has risen up against you during those days?
No, you have, of course, but it was a mixture between people who really wanted to demonstrate against the political system that they don't believe in. Mm-hmm. You have people who's been paid by Qatar in order to demonstrate for the propaganda, and you have the terrorists who's been infiltrating those demonstrations in order to kill the policeman in order to retaliate. That's what happened in the first week of the...
So that's only what happened. The police retaliated on killings that were done from within the group that was protesting.
The first week we had many policemen being killed by the demonstrators. Who are they? Yeah. Peaceful demonstrators? Of course you have machine guns and you have everything from the very beginning. So that's what happened. Anyway, the president, if he wants to leave, he will leave through the constitution and ballot box. And if he wants to come, he will come through the constitution and the ballot box. And both will reflect the public opinion.
Right. Has there been credible opposition in the last years? Credible people who challenged you?
We have opposition. You can meet them. They are in Syria. They live in Syria. They have grassroots, Syrian grassroots, big, small opposition, new. I mean, this is another issue, but we have them, of course, and they are allowed.
Because we in the West would think, well, what we have seen in the media, all kinds of media, a brutal crackdown, and now a war where there's stories of barrel bombs, of massive incarceration, of extreme government violence. One would think twice before he would oppose you, criticize you.
The question, what means would you resort to when you have people killing police and destroying and burning for the first days? It didn't happen 6 months later, like the propaganda in the West tried to promote that peaceful demonstrations turned into armed actions just because the crackdown. That's not true. Again, they killed the policemen for the first week.
Looking back, what would you have done differently in 2011? What would you have done differently now?
The two things that we based our politics on, the two pillars, are dialogue and fighting terrorism. Today we're going to keep fighting terrorism, and we're going to continue with the dialogue with every involved party in Syria.
So even if there would be an uprising like there was in 2011, you would react
if
the
the
same?
same happen, people killing police, we have to respond.
Right.
That's our job as a government.
Right. Concluding, if you look back on 4 years, a large part of the country is under control of different rebel groups of ISIS. Innocent people are dying on both sides of the front. People are suffering. You are the president. You are responsible for protecting your people. Do you ask yourself, have I done enough to protect my people?
I cannot judge myself because I'm not going to be objective talking about myself. I mean, the Syrian people would say the president did enough or not. At the very beginning, you mentioned the crackdown. Many people say the president didn't do enough to crack down those terrorists. This is versus what you mentioned that's been published in the West. So if we want to be objective, all of us as Syrians, to judge this situation, it should be at the end of the crisis, because the end result will tell you about the beginning. Now we are still in the middle. It's not enough to talk about this.
Okay, but can you look at yourself in the mirror thinking, I'm doing enough?
Yes, of course, and that changes every day. Sometimes you judge the same action in 2 different or 3 or 4 different ways every day, because you live with a very quickly changing situation, and your mood, your thinking, you're influenced by all these things on a daily basis. So you may change, but no one of them will be concrete and absolute unless you overcome this crisis. This is where you can think more objectively and realistically about your actions as president.
Last question. How long will this take before it's resolved?
If the responsible countries take actions against the flood and the flowing of the terrorists and the logistic supports, I can guarantee that it will take less than 1 year.
Less than 1 year?
Less than 1 year. But the problem that they still supporting them on a daily basis more and more in order to make it more messy and to put obstacles in front of any solution, because they want the solution, what they call the political solution, to be ended with the changing this state, getting rid of this president or depose him, and so on. So that's why it will drag on.
So if it were without outside influence, you'd be done in 1 year?
Definitely, for one reason, because the terrorists in Syria, they don't have the social incubators yet. That's why we're not worried about them.
Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming to Damascus.
Thank you.